They say a routine traffic stop should be just that, routine. But what happens when a simple pullover spirals into a nightmare? Imagine this: a quiet street, flashing lights reflecting off the rain-slicked pavement, and a heavily pregnant black woman sitting alone in her car. She's anxious, but she's calm, knowing her rights, knowing the law. She's Judge Camila Jordan, a name respected in courtrooms across the city. But tonight, none of that matters. The officer walking towards her car has no idea who she is. To him, she's just another face. And from the tight grip on his holster to the anger in his voice, it's clear he's looking for a confrontation. What he doesn't know is that his next move, a single devastating punch, will shatter more than just the peace of this night. It will ignite a firestorm, exposing deep-rooted corruption, racial bias, and a system that has protected people like him for far too long. But how did we get here? How did a simple traffic stop turn into a scene that would shake a community to its core? Who is this woman at the center of it all, and why did this officer go too far? Stay with us, because the story that unfolds is as shocking as it is heartbreaking. Judge Camila Jordan is a powerhouse, a woman who spent years fighting for justice from behind the bench. She's faced tough cases, navigated the complexities of the law, and earned the respect of her peers. She's a symbol of resilience in a city often divided by race and class. But as she sits behind the wheel that night, all of that feels distant. She's thinking about her baby, the tiny life growing inside her, and the promise of a future she and her husband Andre have been building together. Little does she know, her life is about to be turned upside down. Now let's rewind just a bit, to a moment before the flashing lights appear in her rearview mirror. Camila's driving home from another long day at court. Her mind drifts to the nursery she and Andre have been working on. The soft blankets, the crib nestled against the window. It's almost ready, just like her heart is almost ready to welcome their child into the world. But as she notices the police cruiser pulling up behind her, those peaceful thoughts vanish, replaced by a creeping sense of dread. Camila knows the protocol. She's judged hundreds of cases involving police encounters. So when she pulls over, she's careful, precise, keeping her hands visible, moving slowly, speaking calmly. She's done everything right, or so she thinks, but something about the officer's approach feels off. His hand rests a little too heavily on his gun, his voice a little too sharp when he barks out his first words. License and registration. She tries to reason with him to understand why she's being stopped, but it's clear he isn't interested in explanations. He orders her out of the car, ignoring her protests that she's pregnant, that she's concerned for her safety. Camila's voice remains steady, but her heart is racing. She knows how quickly these situations can turn, how easily a routine stop can spiral out of control. 100 stories flash through her mind. Stories she's read in court filings, stories she's seen on the news. But now she's the one in the headlines, though she doesn't realize it yet. She doesn't want to believe this is happening to her, not here, not now. But as the officer's grip tightens around her arm, as he yanks her from the car with a force that sends pain shooting through her body, reality crashes down. And then the unthinkable happens. His fist flies towards her face, connecting with a brutal impact that sends her reeling to the ground. The pain is blinding, and all she can think about is her baby. She's a judge, she's a mother-to-be, and she's been reduced to a victim in a split second. Around them, bystanders gather, phones held high, recording every second. Their voices rise in protest, but for Camila, their words are just a blur. She can taste the metallic tang of blood in her mouth, feel the cold, hard pavement beneath her, and all she can wonder is, how did it come to this? The world around her feels distant, almost surreal, as if she's caught in a nightmare she can't wake up from. And as she lies there, struggling to keep her consciousness, the reality of what's happened begins to sink in. She knows that her life will never be the same again. She knows that the officer standing above her has no idea of the storm he's just unleashed. This time, the truth won't stay hidden behind closed doors. This time, the cameras are rolling, and the eyes of the nation are watching. What the officer doesn't realize as he stands over her is that his actions have just ignited a fuse. This isn't going to be another incident swept under the rug. He's just assaulted one of the city's most respected judges, And this time, the system is about to turn its eye inward. Because Camila Jordan is no ordinary victim. She's a fighter, a woman with a voice that can't be silenced. And what he thought would be a moment of unchecked power will become the catalyst for a battle that shakes the very foundations of the police force and the city itself. It's the kind of video that spreads like wildfire, grainy footage, shaky from a cell phone, capturing every shocking moment. The scene unfolds on a dimly lit street where flashing police lights cut through the darkness. A bystander's voice trembles as they narrate what they're seeing. "Oh my God, he just hit her, and she's pregnant." The camera zooms in, catching the moment that changes everything. Officer Darren Cole's fist colliding with Camila's face, her body crumpling to the ground, clutching her belly in instinctive protection. But what the cameras don't capture is the inner turmoil that erupts within Camila. Lying on the ground, pain searing through her cheek and skull, she's fighting to stay conscious. Her thoughts race back to the baby, to the life inside her that she's fought so hard to protect. It feels as though time has slowed, every sound distorted. The shouts of onlookers, the crackle of the police radio, the frantic voices of those calling for an ambulance. Every breath feels like a struggle, her vision swimming as she clings to the hope that her child will survive this. In those agonizing seconds, her mind flashes to her husband, Andre, and the life they'd been building together. She thinks of the nursery, the crib that remains empty. Would she make it through this night? Would their child be safe? Desperation claws at her, but the pain is too much, pulling her under. Yet, even through the haze, there's a burning thought. This isn't where her story ends. This cannot be how she and her baby's lives are defined. Officer Cole, meanwhile, stands over her, a mixture of shock and anger written on his face. His hand twitches near his holster, but the growing crowd keeps him in check. People are stepping forward now, closing in, their phones out, recording every angle, every detail. "What the hell are you doing?" someone yells, while another pleads, "She's a pregnant woman, man, back off." Cole's face tightens, a flicker of realization crossing his features, but it's too late. The damage is done. The anger in the crowd is palpable, a low rumble that promises more than just words. Within minutes, more officers arrive on the scene, their expressions turning from confusion to alarm as they recognize the woman lying on the ground. One of them, Officer Jameson, rushes to Camila's side, his voice catching when he addresses her. "Judge Jordan, oh my God, what did he do to you?" Jameson looks up at Cole, disbelief and fury mixing in his eyes. "You had no idea who this is, did you?" But the crowd, the cameras, and the flashing lights make clear that the answer doesn't matter anymore. This story is no longer theirs to control. The ambulance arrives and paramedics lift Camila onto a stretcher. Her face is bruised and swollen, and she clings to consciousness, her fingers gripping one paramedic's arm. "My baby, please. Is my baby okay?" she gasps, her voice barely a whisper. The paramedic reassures her, but his own face is tight with concern as they hurry her into the ambulance. As the doors close, the crowd's anger only grows, their shouts echoing through the night air. "Justice for her," they chant, voices blending into a single, urgent demand. The next day, the video is everywhere. It's on the news, it's trending on social media, and it's sparking a national conversation. The headline blares, "Pregnant black judge assaulted by white officer, captured on camera." People are sharing it, dissecting every frame, every second of footage, and the hashtag, "Justice for Judge Jordan," explodes across platforms. The story strikes a chord because it's not just about one woman. It's about a pattern that feels all too familiar. The power imbalance, the brutality, the sense that some lives are worth less than others. It's a story that resonates with communities who have faced the same struggle, seen the same injustice. In homes, in offices, in community centers across the country, people watch and react. Some are horrified, others are outraged, and a few even try to justify Cole's actions, clinging to the idea that maybe there's a side to this story that hasn't been told. But no matter the reaction, one thing is clear: this story is not going away. Camila's face, swollen and bruised, has become a symbol, one that the city cannot ignore. And as more details emerge about her identity, her role as a judge, and her work in the community, the story takes on a new dimension. Back at the hospital, Camila wakes up to a room filled with sterile light and the beeping of monitors. Her husband Andre is by her side, his face a mixture of relief and rage. He holds her hand, trying to keep his voice steady as he updates her. "They've arrested him, Camila. Officer Cole is in custody, but it's everywhere. The video, the news, they're all talking about you." Camila's mind is foggy, the pain medication dulling the edges of her thoughts, but she manages a nod. "Good," she whispers, her voice raw. "They need to see this. They need to know." Tears blur her vision as she thinks about what comes next, the fight that she knows they have ahead of them, the weight of what it will mean to take on the system that nearly destroyed her. But even through the haze, she's certain of one thing. She won't back down. The fire that burns within her is stronger than the pain, stronger than the fear. The doctors come in, running checks, monitoring her pregnancy with tight-lipped concern. They don't speak the words, but their expressions betray their fear. Camila knows she's not out of the woods yet. The trauma of the assault, the impact of the blow, could still put her child at risk. As they leave, she looks over at Andre, seeing the worry etched into every line of his face. "We have to fight, Andre," she says, her voice gaining strength despite the pain. "We can't let this go." Andre squeezes her hand, a flash of determination crossing his features. "We will. I promise you, Camila. We'll make them pay for what they did to you, to our family. They're not going to get away with this." He leans closer, his voice barely a whisper. "They're offering settlements, trying to make this go away quietly. But we won't take it. This is bigger than us." Outside the hospital, the protests are growing. People gather with signs demanding accountability, calling for Cole's conviction, and holding vigils for Camila's recovery. The city is a tinderbox, and this incident has lit the match. But for every voice demanding change, there are others trying to quiet it. Calls come in from the police union, lawyers offering settlements, attempts to silence the story before it gets any bigger. But Camila and Andre refuse to be silenced. They know that accepting a payout would mean letting down everyone who's looked to them for strength. Inside her hospital room, Camila watches the news coverage, seeing herself replayed over and over again. Each time, it's like a fresh wound, seeing her own pain, the brutality of that night, displayed for the world. But she knows that this visibility is her power. She knows that by staying in the public eye, she's keeping the pressure on the system, ensuring that they can't just bury this and move on. The camera has become her ally, turning her suffering into a rallying cry for change. The footage has set off a chain reaction, one that no one can stop now. As she lies in that hospital bed, bruised but unbroken, she realizes that she has become more than just a victim of this assault. She is a symbol, a catalyst for change that the city so desperately needs. And as the calls for justice grow louder, Camila knows that she has no choice but to see this fight through to the end. Her courtroom might have been her battleground before, but now the entire nation is watching, waiting to see if justice will finally prevail. As Camila recovers in the hospital, a new battle begins. One fought not with fists, but with words, evidence, and unrelenting determination. The city is buzzing with tension, and the courthouse, once a place where Camila presided as a symbol of justice, is now a battleground where her future will be decided. Outside, protesters chant, "Justice for Judge Jordan," their voices a constant reminder of the stakes. News cameras line the streets, capturing every moment, every statement from officials who promise a thorough investigation. Inside, Andre Jordan prepares for the fight of his life. He's no stranger to courtroom battles. He's defended the marginalized, taken on corrupt officials, and fought for civil rights. But this time, it's personal. He's not just fighting for a client. He's fighting for his wife, for his unborn child, and for the countless others who have faced similar injustices. He knows that the odds are stacked against them. The police union is powerful, with resources and connections that could bury the case if they aren't careful. But Andre refuses to let fear dictate his actions. Andre spends sleepless nights combing through every piece of evidence, gathering witness statements, analyzing the footage from that fateful night. He knows that to win, they'll need more than just the video. They need to prove a pattern, a history of abuse of a department that has failed to hold its own accountable. It's a daunting task, but Andre is relentless. With each passing day, he grows more determined, more focused. Their home becomes a war room filled with stacks of case files, transcripts, and research. Andre's phone rings constantly. Journalists seeking interviews, activists offering support, even threats from anonymous callers who think the Jordans should drop the case. But each threat only strengthens their resolve. Andre has already seen the darkness in the system, but now he's staring directly into its eyes, and he refuses to blink. One evening, Andre sits across from Camila in her hospital room, a thick binder of documents in his hands. "They've been trying to keep this under wraps," he says, his voice low, careful not to wake their unborn child resting beneath Camila's heart. "But I found a history, complaints against Officer Cole, excessive force, racial profiling, all swept under the rug." Camila nods, her face still bruised but her spirit unbroken. "We have to use it, Andre. We have to make them see that this isn't just about me. It's about all the others who never got their day in court." Andre reaches across the table, taking her hand in his. "I'm with you, Camila, all the way. We're going to expose every single one of them." As they prepare for the trial, they're not alone. Community leaders rally behind them, organizing town hall meetings, gathering testimonies from others who have suffered under the same system. Civil rights groups provide legal support, sharing strategies and offering resources that might have otherwise been out of reach. The public pressure is mounting, and the city's leaders can feel the weight of it. They know that this trial will be watched not just by the locals, but by the entire nation. The police department, meanwhile, is scrambling to maintain control. Behind closed doors, Captain David Monroe and his inner circle strategize. They know the risks of letting this case go to trial, how it could expose years of misconduct, how it could bring down not just Officer Cole, but potentially the entire command structure. Monroe speaks with the city's legal team, urging them to push for a quiet settlement. "The last thing we need is a media circus," he says, his voice tense. "Offer them money, make it go away." But Camila and Andre are not interested in money. They're interested in accountability. When the settlement offer comes in, a substantial sum meant to buy their silence, Andre reads it over, then calmly tears it in half. "Tell them no," he says to the lawyer representing the city. "We're taking this to court." The lawyer tries to argue, but Andre's voice cuts through the room like steel. "My wife was nearly killed. My child's life put at risk, and you think we're going to take your hush money? This isn't about the money. It's about the truth. See you in court." The first day of the trial arrives, and the courthouse is a spectacle. The media is out in full force, cameras flashing as Camila and Andre make their way through the crowd, holding hands. Protesters cheer for them, while others hold signs demanding justice, not just for Camila, but for everyone who has faced police violence. As they walk through the courthouse doors, the gravity of the moment settles in. This is more than just a trial. It's a reckoning. Inside the courtroom, Officer Cole sits at the defendant's table, his expression blank, his lawyer beside him looking tense. The prosecution, representing the state, presents their case first, laying out the assault, the violation of protocol, and the indisputable evidence captured on video. They bring in medical experts who testify to the severity of Camila's injuries, describing the risk she faced as a pregnant woman subjected to such violence. Andre sits beside Camila, listening intently, his mind racing with thoughts of what's to come. He knows that the real challenge will begin when they cross-examine the officers and bring forward the evidence of systemic corruption. When it's finally his turn to speak, Andre rises, facing the jury with a calm but intense gaze. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he begins, his voice steady. "This is not just a case about a single act of violence. It's about a system that allows certain individuals to believe they can act with impunity. Officer Cole didn't just strike a woman that night. He struck at the heart of what justice is supposed to mean. And he believed he could get away with it." He paces slowly, letting his words sink in. "But he miscalculated. He misjudged my wife's strength, and he misjudged the strength of this community. And today, we're here to prove that what happened to Camila wasn't an isolated incident, it was the product of a system that has turned a blind eye to injustice for far too long. As Andre presents the evidence of Cole's history of misconduct, the courtroom is riveted. Witness after witness comes forward. Community members who have been harassed, former officers who speak of a culture of silence within the department. And then comes the most critical testimony, Officer Martinez, a man who had served under Captain Monroe's command, who had seen firsthand the efforts to cover up misconduct. Martinez takes the stand, his hands shaking as he swears to tell the truth. He recounts how complaints against Cole were buried, how Monroe pressured officers to change their stories, how the culture within the department was one of fear and intimidation. "I couldn't stay silent anymore," he says, his voice cracking. "Not after what happened to Judge Jordan. It was wrong, and it's been wrong for a long time." Andre presses him gently, drawing out the details that paint a picture of a department that has lost its way. The jury listens closely, their expressions hardening as the depth of the corruption becomes clear. It's no longer just about a single officer. It's about a system that has failed its citizens time and time again. But as the trial progresses, the defense fights back, trying to discredit the witnesses, casting doubt on Camila's account, suggesting that she was combative, that Cole was just following procedure. They imply that she used her position as a judge to escalate the situation, a claim that enrages both Camila and Andre. Yet, Andre remains composed, rebutting each claim with evidence, reminding the jury of the footage that the world has seen. Each day in court is a grueling battle, but Camila and Andre stand firm. They face the media outside, making statements that reinforce their commitment to justice, even as they face threats and intimidation behind the scenes. Anonymous notes are left at their door, warning them to drop the case or face the consequences. But Andre's response is always the same: "We won't back down." As the days turn into weeks, the trial becomes a national spectacle, a flashpoint in the ongoing struggle for accountability and reform in law enforcement. Camila watches the protest from her hospital bed, her body healing but her mind always on the fight. She reads letters from supporters, people who have been moved by her story, who see in her a reflection of their own struggles. She knows that their fight has become bigger than the courtroom. It's about giving a voice to those who have been silenced for too long. One evening, after another exhausting day in court, Andre returns to the hospital, finding Camila sitting up, a determined look in her eyes. "We're going to win this, Andre," she says softly. "Not just for us, but for everyone who needs to believe that the system can change." Andre nods, his own determination mirrored in her gaze. "I know, and no matter what happens, I'm proud of you, Camila. You've shown the world what strength looks like." And as the trial nears its conclusion, the weight of their struggle hangs over the courtroom like a storm cloud, ready to burst. The city holds its breath, waiting to see whether justice will finally be served. As the trial continues, a new focus emerges, one that takes the spotlight off the courtroom and shines it directly into the dark corners of the police department. Andre knows that winning the case against Officer Cole is only part of the battle. To truly change the system, they need to expose the rot that allowed officers like Cole to operate unchecked for years. And to do that, they have to dig deep, uncovering layers of misconduct that stretch far beyond a single brutal encounter. Andre and his legal team dive into the records, spending long nights in their makeshift office, combing through police reports, complaint files, and internal memos. It's grueling work, but it starts to pay off. They discover a disturbing pattern: complaints against Cole that never made it past the initial review, internal investigations that were quietly closed, and evidence of other officers who had engaged in similar acts of excessive force, all swept under the rug by Captain Monroe's command. One of the most revealing pieces of evidence comes from a whistleblower deep within the department, a clerk who had witnessed firsthand how complaints were altered or discarded before they reached public scrutiny. She meets Andre in a quiet cafe, her hands shaking as she slides a folder across the table. "They told me to destroy these," she says, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I couldn't do it. Not after what happened to your wife." Inside the folder are copies of reports, pages that tell a story of systemic abuse, where officers like Cole were protected, even rewarded for their behavior. The reports detail incidents of racial profiling, excessive force, and harassment, all buried to protect the reputation of the department. Andre's heart pounds as he flips through the pages, realizing the magnitude of what they've uncovered. This isn't just about Officer Cole anymore. It's about a system that has operated with impunity, where those in power have used their positions to cover up the truth. Andre takes this new evidence to Lydia, his fellow attorney and trusted ally. "This changes everything," he tells her, spreading the documents across her desk. "We can tie this directly to Monroe. He knew about Cole's behavior and did nothing to stop it. He protected him." Lydia studies the documents, her expression hardening. "We need to get this into the public record. If we can prove that Monroe orchestrated the cover-ups, it's not just Cole on trial, it's the entire command structure of the department. But bringing this evidence to light won't be easy. Monroe is a powerful figure in the city, with connections that extend into politics and the courts, and he's not going down without a fight." As word of Andre's discoveries begins to spread, the pressure mounts. Anonymous threats escalate, targeting not only Andre, but also the whistleblower and other witnesses willing to come forward. One evening, a brick is thrown through the window of the Jordans' home, a message scrawled across it, "Drop the case or else." Camila reads the note, her face pale but resolute. "They're scared, Andre. That means we're getting close, but we can't back down now. Too many people are counting on us." Andre nods, though the weight of the danger hangs over him like a cloud. He tightens security around their home, hiring private guards and ensuring that every witness has protection. They know they're walking a dangerous line, but they also know that this fight is too important to turn back. Meanwhile, the atmosphere inside the police department grows tense. Officers who had once remained loyal to Monroe now find themselves questioning their allegiance. Whispers circulate about the secrets that might come to light, about the career-ending consequences that could follow if they stay silent. Officer Martinez, the key witness who had initially come forward, finds himself isolated by his colleagues, treated like a pariah. But he remains steadfast, knowing that his testimony could be the tipping point. One night, after another grueling day in court, Andre receives a call from an unexpected source, Detective Harris, an officer who had served under Monroe's command for years. His voice is low, filled with a mix of fear and urgency. "I need to meet with you," Harris says. "There's something you don't know, something that could change the entire case." Andre agrees and they meet in a parking garage under the cover of darkness. Harris arrives, looking over his shoulder as if expecting someone to be watching. He hands Andre a flash drive, his hands trembling. "This is everything," he says. "Emails, internal memos, proof that Monroe ordered us to bury complaints against Cole and others. He made sure nothing got out. If anyone spoke up, they were pushed out or worse." Andre's mind races as he processes the implications. "Why are you coming forward now, Harris?" he asks. Harris sighs, looking down at his feet. "I can't live with it anymore. What happened to your wife? It was a line too far. I've seen too much, done too much, and I need to make it right." Armed with the flash drive, Andre returns to Lydia, and together they comb through its contents. The evidence is damning. Emails from Monroe instructing officers to alter reports, directives to close investigations without proper review, and discussions about how to handle media inquiries to minimize damage. They know that presenting this evidence in court will be a bombshell, one that could blow the entire case wide open. When the time comes, Andre presents the flash drive to the court, laying out the contents with meticulous detail. "This," he says, holding up a printout of an email from Monroe to his deputies, "is proof that Captain Monroe deliberately suppressed evidence, obstructed investigations, and allowed a culture of abuse to thrive under his watch." The courtroom erupts with whispers, the weight of the revelation sinking in. Monroe, sitting in the gallery, clenches his jaw, his face a mask of controlled anger. He knows that if the jury believes this evidence, his career and his freedom are at risk. Lydia takes the floor, calling Detective Harris to the stand. His testimony is raw, filled with regret as he describes the pressure to conform, the unspoken rules that govern their behavior. "You don't cross Monroe," he says, his voice cracking. "If you do, you're finished. I saw good officers forced out, their careers destroyed because they tried to do the right thing. I stayed quiet for too long." As Harris speaks, the jury watches closely, their expressions shifting from skepticism to anger as they hear the full extent of the cover-up. It's a pivotal moment, one that shifts the trial from a focus on a single act of violence to a broader indictment of a broken system. Outside the courthouse, the media frenzy reaches new heights, with pundits debating what this means for the future of the department and the city's commitment to reform. Monroe, desperate to regain control, attempts to make a statement to the press, denying the allegations and accusing Andre of conducting a smear campaign. But his words ring hollow, drowned out by the voices of protesters who have gathered outside his home demanding his resignation. The city is no longer willing to look the other way, and Monroe is starting to realize that his time is running out. As the trial drags on, the pressure on the department intensifies. Other officers, seeing the tide turning, begin to speak out, providing additional evidence that corroborates Harris's testimony. Internal Affairs is forced to reopen old cases, investigating the patterns of abuse that have come to light. The department's leadership is in chaos, and rumors circulate that Monroe may soon be facing charges of his own. For Andre and Camila, these developments bring a sense of validation, but they know that the fight is far from over. The legal battle has become a war of attrition, with the defense using every tactic to delay proceedings, hoping to wear them down. Yet with each passing day, the truth becomes harder to ignore. One evening, as they prepare for yet another day in court, Camila sits beside Andre, holding his hand. "We're making a difference," she says softly. For the first time, it feels like the system is starting to listen. Andre nods, though he knows that change will not come easily. "We still have a long way to go, Camila. But no matter what happens, we've already won something. We've shown them that they can't hide from the truth." As the final weeks of the trial approach, the city holds its breath. The evidence against Cole is overwhelming, but the revelations about the department's corruption have taken center stage, turning what began as a case of police brutality into a call for sweeping reform. The people of the city watch anxiously, waiting to see if the justice system will rise to the challenge or if it will once again fail those it is supposed to protect. In those last days, as Camila takes the stand for a final time, her voice steady and unwavering, she speaks not just for herself, but for a community that has been fighting for years to be heard. "This is about more than what happened to me," she says, looking directly at the jury. "It's about a promise that was broken, a promise that the law is meant to protect us, to treat us equally. And if we don't hold those in power accountable, then that promise means nothing." Her words hang in the air, resonating through the packed courtroom. Andre watches her, his heart swelling with pride. No matter the outcome, he knows that they have fought with everything they had, that they have turned a spotlight on a darkness that many thought would never be revealed. And as the jury leaves to deliberate, he holds Camila's hand, knowing that their fight has already left a mark that won't easily be erased. The courtroom is silent as the jury returns to their seats, the weight of their decision hanging in the air. Camila sits beside Andre, her hands clenched tightly together, the bruises on her face a painful reminder of what brought them to this moment. The judge glances at the jury foreperson, who rises, holding a piece of paper that will determine the course of their lives, and possibly the future of an entire city. But before the verdict is read, let's rewind to the days leading up to this tense moment. Days filled with testimonies that would sway the jury's hearts and minds, revealing the full extent of the tragedy and the corruption that fueled it. Andre, relentless in his pursuit of justice, takes the courtroom stage with a precision that leaves no stone unturned, determined to make every word count. On one side, the defense attempts to paint Cole as an officer who was following procedure, who felt threatened and reacted as he was trained to. But the video footage is undeniable, showing Camila's compliant behavior, her hands raised, her voice calm even as Cole's aggression escalates. The video is replayed again and again, each time driving home the reality that the defense cannot escape. Officer Cole's actions were not those of a man in fear for his life. They were those of a man exercising power without consequence. The prosecution brings in witnesses from that night, bystanders who recorded the incident on their phones, each with their own perspective on what happened. A young woman, whose video went viral, takes the stand first. Her voice shakes as she describes what she saw, but she holds firm. "I thought he was going to kill her," she says, her eyes glistening with tears. "She kept telling him she was pregnant, and he didn't care. I've never seen anything like it." Another witness, a man who tried to intervene, recalls the fear and frustration he felt as he watched the scene unfold. "He looked right through me," he testifies, glancing over at Cole, who avoids his gaze. "It was like he didn't see any of us, like we weren't even there." Andre cross-examines the defense's witnesses, revealing contradictions and challenging their accounts of that night. He knows that their strategy hinges on discrediting Camila's version of events, suggesting that she provoked the situation. But with each question, Andre chips away at their narrative, exposing the lies that have been carefully constructed to protect one of their own. "Isn't it true," he asks one of the officers who arrived on the scene, "that you saw the blood on Judge Jordan's face, saw the fear in her eyes, and did nothing to stop it?" The officer shifts uncomfortably, his earlier confidence fading. I didn't think it was my place," he mumbles. "I followed orders." Andre's voice rises, cutting through the tension. "And whose orders were those, officer? The same orders that told you to ignore the complaints against Cole, to look the other way when he crossed the line?" The courtroom holds its breath as the officer struggles for words. It's a pivotal moment, one that shifts the momentum in Andre's favor. He knows that they are not just fighting Cole's actions, they are fighting an entire culture of complicity. Then comes the testimony that everyone has been waiting for, Camila's. She steps up to the stand, her presence commanding, her voice steady despite the pain that flickers in her eyes. She recounts the events of that night, her words painting a vivid picture of the fear, the disbelief, the physical agony of being pulled from her car and struck. But she also speaks of something deeper, of the betrayal she felt, not just as a victim, but as a judge who has dedicated her life to upholding the very system that failed her. "I believed in the law," she says, her voice breaking slightly. "I believed that it was there to protect all of us, regardless of who we are or where we come from. But that night, I realized that the law is only as strong as the people who enforce it. And when those people are driven by prejudice and hatred, the law becomes a weapon instead of a shield." Andre watches as the jury members lean forward, captivated by Camila's words. He sees the shift in their expressions, the dawning realization that this case is about more than a single night of violence. It's about a system that has allowed people like Cole to act with impunity, knowing that their actions will be covered up, their misconduct ignored. Camila pauses, her eyes sweeping across the courtroom, landing finally on Cole. "You thought you could silence me," she says, her voice gaining strength. "But you were wrong. Because I'm not just fighting for myself. I'm fighting for every person who has ever been told that their life doesn't matter." As she steps down from the stand, the courtroom erupts into whispers. The defense tries to regain control, but the impact of Camila's words lingers. Even the judge, who has maintained a stoic expression throughout the trial, seems to recognize the gravity of what has just been said. Next, Andre calls Officer Martinez back to the stand, this time to address the broader corruption within the department. Martinez testifies about the pressures he faced to remain silent, the threats he received from his own superiors when he first tried to report Cole's behavior. He speaks of secret meetings, where complaints were reviewed behind closed doors and quietly dismissed. "They told me to forget about it," Martinez says, his voice trembling. "They told me that speaking out would be the end of my career, and they were right." The courtroom is stunned into silence as Martinez reveals the inner workings of a department that has prioritized loyalty over integrity, that has sacrificed accountability for the sake of protecting its own. His words strike a chord with the jury, exposing the culture of fear that has allowed officers like Cole to operate without consequences. But the defense fights back hard, questioning Martinez's credibility, suggesting that he's speaking out only because he has a personal vendetta against Monroe. They call Monroe himself to the stand, hoping to cast doubt on the allegations. Monroe denies everything, maintaining a facade of professionalism even as the evidence piles up against him. "We took every complaint seriously," he insists. "We followed protocol, but sometimes things slip through the cracks. It's unfortunate, but it's not a conspiracy." Andre steps up to cross-examine Monroe, his questions cutting like a knife. "Captain Monroe, isn't it true that you ordered officers to destroy evidence related to complaints against Cole? That you told them to alter reports?" Monroe's jaw tightens, but he shakes his head. "That's a lie, and you know it." Andre holds up a copy of an email from the flash drive, displaying it for the jury. "Then how do you explain this? An email sent directly from your account, instructing officers to close a case without review. Is that following protocol?" Monroe's face pales, his confident demeanor cracking under the weight of the evidence. The jury leans in, sensing the shift in power. It's clear that Monroe's words are no longer enough to shield him from the truth. As the days pass, the testimonies continue to mount, each one peeling back another layer of the corruption that has festered within the department. The courtroom becomes a theater of accountability, where lies are exposed and the voices of the silenced finally find a platform. The city watches, transfixed as a narrative of systemic failure unfolds before their eyes. In the evenings, Andre and Camila sit together, reflecting on the day's events. They know that the outcome is still uncertain, that the system they are challenging is deeply entrenched. But they also know that they have made it this far, farther than many thought possible, and that they have forced a reckoning that cannot be easily ignored. The final days of the trial bring an air of anticipation, a sense that history is being written with every word spoken in that courtroom. Camila gives interviews from the hospital, speaking with a quiet determination that resonates with people across the country. "I didn't ask to become a symbol," she tells one reporter, "but if my story can help others, then I'll carry that weight." Andre, exhausted but resolute, stands before the jury one last time. "This case is not just about my wife. It's about a promise that every citizen should be able to rely on, that those who enforce the law will be held to it, that when the system fails, there will be people brave enough to demand that it be better. Today, you have a chance to set that example, to say that no one is above the law." The jury listens, their faces unreadable as the judge instructs them on their duty. As they leave the room to deliberate, Andre and Camila share a moment of quiet, a sense of peace amidst the chaos. They've done all they can, and now they must wait. The courtroom is packed as the jury returns with their verdict. The air is thick with anticipation, each breath held as if it might tip the scales of justice. Camila grips Andre's hand tightly, her heart pounding in her chest. The judge asks the foreperson to read the verdict, and every eye in the room is fixed on a single sheet of paper that will determine the fate of Officer Cole and the future of a city that has been torn apart by the case. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Darren Cole, guilty of assault and misconduct." A collective gasp ripples through the courtroom. For a moment, time seems to stand still. Andre lets out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, turning to Camila with tears in his eyes. She feels a rush of emotion, her hands trembling as she clutches the edge of the table. It's a victory, a moment that many thought would never come. But as she looks at Cole, sitting rigidly at the defense table, his face a mask of disbelief and anger, she knows that the fight is far from over. The judge's gavel strikes, signaling the end of the trial. "Sentencing will take place in 3 weeks, she announces, her tone firm but weary. Court is adjourned. As the courtroom begins to empty, reporters and cameras rush forward, eager to capture the reactions. Outside, cheers erupt from the crowd gathered on the courthouse steps, their chants of "Justice for Judge Jordan" echoing through the city streets. Camila and Andre step out into the bright afternoon sun, facing a sea of supporters and journalists. The atmosphere is electric, a mixture of relief and triumph. But amidst the celebration, Camila's thoughts are heavy with the realization that one guilty verdict will not change the system overnight. Still, she raises her head, looking into the cameras with a resolve that has only grown stronger. "This verdict is a step forward," she says, her voice carrying over the noise. "But our work is not done. We will continue to fight for accountability, for reforms that ensure no one is above the law. This is just the beginning." The next days are a blur of media appearances, interviews, and meetings with community leaders. The story of Camila's case dominates headlines across the nation, and her name becomes a symbol of resilience and the push for change. But behind the scenes, Andre and Camila know that the real challenge lies in turning this moment into lasting reform. Captain Monroe, facing mounting pressure and the threat of his own criminal charges, is forced to resign. The city announces a sweeping internal investigation into the police department, promising to root out the corruption that has come to light. But many are skeptical, remembering too well how similar promises have been made in the past, only to be forgotten once the headlines fade. Camila is determined not to let that happen. She joins forces with civil rights groups, attending town halls and pushing for new legislation that would require independent oversight of police misconduct cases. She becomes a familiar face at city council meetings, speaking with the same conviction she brought to the courtroom. Her story becomes a rallying cry, a reminder that real change requires persistence. But the personal toll of the battle is never far from her mind. Back at home, Camila tries to find moments of peace, bonding with Andre as they prepare for the arrival of their child. The nursery, once a place of anticipation and joy, has become a sanctuary, a reminder of what they're fighting for. On quiet evenings, Camila sits in the rocking chair, reading aloud to the baby growing inside her, feeling the gentle kicks that remind her of the life they've protected. One evening, as they sit together in the nursery, Andre wraps his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You know, I think our little one is going to grow up in a different world," he says softly. "Maybe not perfect, but better than the one we've known." Camila smiles, though a shadow of worry lingers in her eyes. "I hope so, Andre. But I can't help wondering how many others will have to fight the same battles we did." Andre kisses her forehead, pulling her closer. "We've made a start, Camila, and that's more than most people get to do. We've shown them that they can't hide from the truth." As the day of Cole's sentencing approaches, the city braces for what comes next. Rumors of protests and counter-protests swirl, and tensions run high. Many in the community feel that the verdict is not enough, that true justice won't be served until those who protected Cole are held accountable as well. Others worry that the backlash will be fierce, that the department's attempts at reform will only provoke a defensive reaction from those who see any criticism as an attack on their authority. The courtroom is once again filled to capacity on the day of sentencing. Camila and Andre sit together, surrounded by supporters and friends who have become part of their fight. Cole's lawyer argues for leniency, painting him as a man who made a mistake in a moment of stress. But the prosecution counters with the evidence of his history, the complaints that went ignored, the people who were hurt long before Camila ever crossed his path. When the judge delivers the sentence, 15 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 10, the reactions are mixed. Some see it as a just outcome, a sign that accountability is possible. Others feel that it's too lenient, that Cole will eventually walk free while the trauma he caused lingers in the lives he shattered. Outside the courthouse, Camila addresses the crowd one more time, her voice firm even as exhaustion seeps into her bones. This is not just about one man's punishment. It's about changing a culture that has allowed this kind of violence to go unpunished for too long. We have to keep pushing, keep demanding better, for my child, and for every child in this city. The months that follow are a mix of hope and frustration. The city's new police chief pledges to implement reforms, and a task force is established to oversee the changes. But resistance is strong, and progress is slow. Some officers resign in protest, claiming that the department is being unfairly targeted. Others quietly adapt, knowing that the world around them is shifting. Camila and Andre continue their work, but they also try to reclaim some semblance of normalcy. As Camila's due date approaches, they focus on preparing for their child's arrival, finding solace in the small, everyday moments that remind them of what truly matters. They decorate the nursery, choosing colors that feel warm and hopeful, and make plans for the future that don't revolve around courtrooms and protests. And then, one early morning in the middle of spring, their baby arrives, a girl they name Amara, which means grace. As they hold her in their arms for the first time, all the struggles, all the pain seem to melt away, leaving only the overwhelming joy of a new beginning. Camila looks down at her daughter's tiny face, feeling the weight of her promise settle in her heart. "You're going to grow up in a better world," she whispers, pressing a gentle kiss to Amara's forehead. "I'll make sure of it." The days that follow are filled with sleepless nights and tender moments as Camila and Andre navigate the challenges of new parenthood. The outside world seems distant, the noise of politics and protest fading into the background as they focus on their family. But even in the quiet moments, the fight they've waged is never far from their minds. They know that the future they've dreamed of for Amara will require constant vigilance, that the struggle for justice is a long road with no easy end. One afternoon, as they sit on the porch with Amara nestled in Camila's arms, Andre reads the latest headlines from his phone. "They're saying that the department is actually starting to see some change," he murmurs. "A few of the reforms we pushed for, they're being implemented." Camila glances down at her daughter, who gurgles happily in her arms, and then looks back at Andre with a faint smile. "It's a start," she says, her voice soft. "And maybe one day, she won't have to fight the same battles we did." Andre leans over to kiss Camila's temple, his voice filled with quiet pride. "She'll have you to thank for that. You're the strongest person I know, Camila." She shakes her head, a tear slipping down her cheek. "We did this together, Andre, and we'll keep doing it, for as long as it takes." As the sun sets behind them, casting a warm glow over their home, Camila and Andre hold their daughter close, feeling the weight of their journey, but also the hope that has carried them through. They know that there are still challenges ahead, still battles to be fought. But for now, in this moment, they allow themselves to believe that change is possible, that their fight has made a difference, and that Amara will grow up in a world where justice is not just a word, but a reality. 6 months have passed since the trial ended, and life in the city has slowly started to shift. The protests have quieted, and the headlines have moved on. But the impact of Camila's fight lingers. For Camila and Andre, the battle brought about changes they never imagined, both within their family and in the world around them. Their daughter Amara is now a constant source of joy, her laughter filling the house with a lightness that contrasts sharply with the darkness they fought through. Camila spends her mornings in the nursery, watching Amara reach for the mobile above her crib, her tiny hands grasping at the bright colors. It's a reminder of how much has changed, of how far they've come since that night on the roadside when everything seemed so fragile. Outside their home, the city is undergoing its own transformation. The reforms Camila and Andre pushed for have begun to take root, albeit slowly. A new oversight board reviews complaints against police officers, and some changes in training protocols have been implemented. Community leaders have a seat at the table during discussions about public safety, and while the road is long, there is a sense of cautious optimism that the city might finally be moving in the right direction. Andre continues his work as a civil rights attorney, but he has also become a mentor to young lawyers and activists, sharing the lessons he learned from their fight. He tells them about the importance of persistence, about how justice doesn't come all at once, but in small victories that accumulate over time. His days are long, but he returns home each night to find Camila waiting with a smile, Amara nestled against her shoulder. Camila, too, has found new purpose. She returns to the courtroom, resuming her role as a judge, but her perspective has shifted. She approaches each case with a deeper understanding of the people who stand before her, aware of how fragile justice can be. Her decisions are guided not just by the law, but by the empathy that grew out of her own pain. And when she speaks to those who come before her, she remembers what it felt like to be unheard, to be dismissed, and she vows to never let that happen again. One afternoon, as she prepares for a community event, Camila catches a glimpse of her reflection in the mirror. The bruises on her face have faded, but the scars remain, etched deep in her memory. Yet, she no longer shies away from them. They are a part of her story, a testament to the strength she found in herself and to the fight she never expected to lead. The event is a gathering of local leaders and activists, a celebration of the small but meaningful changes they've achieved. Camila stands before the crowd, her voice steady and strong as she speaks about the journey they've been on together. We've come a long way, she says, but we're not finished. Real change takes time, and it takes all of us. But I believe that together, we can build a city where justice is not just a promise, but a reality. The applause is warm, filled with the kind of hope that had once seemed impossible. Andre stands beside her, Amara in his arms, and for a moment, they are a picture of a future that feels within reach, a family that has weathered the storm and come out stronger for it. Later that evening, back at home, they sit on the porch, watching as the sun sets over the city. The air is cool, the sounds of summer filling the quiet spaces between them. Amara sleeps peacefully in Camila's arms, and Andre wraps a blanket around them both, his hand resting gently on Camila's shoulder. You know, Andre says, his voice soft, I think we're going to be okay. Camila leans her head against his, smiling as she looks down at their daughter. Yeah, she replies, her voice filled with a quiet certainty. I think we will be. For the first time in a long while, they allow themselves to just be, a family, at peace, dreaming of a future that feels brighter than the past. And as the stars begin to dot the sky above them, Camila closes her eyes, holding on to the belief that their fight, their story, has made a difference. She knows there will be more battles ahead, that change is a constant struggle. But she also knows that they are ready for whatever comes next, together. And with Amara in her arms, she is filled with the hope that the world she will grow up in will be kinder, more just because they dared to challenge what others thought could never be changed.